It started like a love story, but ended like a heist movie. They weren't gangsters. They weren't cyber criminals. They were just a couple, young, attractive, and madly in love. In the heart of Singapore, Siriwipa and Peng seemed to have it all. Luxury cars, high-end fashion, expensive dinners, and an image that screamed success. From the outside, they looked like the ultimate power couple, living fast, living rich, and living free. But none of it was real. Behind the designer labels and curated Instagram lives was a trail of deception that stretched across borders. A scheme so elaborate, so meticulously crafted, it fooled dozens of victims and siphoned away over $32 million. This wasn't just fraud, it was performance, and they played their roles perfectly. What started as a dream soon became one of the biggest scams in Singapore's recent history. The betrayal was shocking, the escape cinematic, and the aftermath unforgettable. This is the story of how two lovers turned into fugitives and how they nearly got away with everything. To understand how it all began, we have to rewind to 2017. At the center of this story is not Peng, but Siriwipa. Surprisingly, she wasn't just a participant, she was the mastermind. Think of her as the modern-day Eve, the one who tasted the forbidden fruit, then handed it sweetly to her partner. But let's not get too far ahead. Back then, Siriwipa was living her best life in South Korea. Seoul was her playground. From the trendiest fashion boutiques to upscale restaurants, she indulged in everything the K-culture dream had to offer. She wasn't just passing through, she was soaking it in, living like royalty. But there was one question that no one seemed to ask. How was she affording all of it? Because Siriwipa wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't born into wealth, yet somehow the money flowed. The lifestyle continued. And behind those Instagram filters, something darker was taking root. This wasn't just a phase, it was the beginning of something much bigger. And it was only just getting started. To the people around her, Siriwipa was the daughter of wealth. She claimed to come from a rich family, often boasting about her time studying in the UK. She dressed the part, spoke with confidence, moved through luxury circles like she belonged there. And for a while, everyone believed her. But beneath the designer outfits and the stories of overseas education, something didn't quite add up. Whispers began to surface. Rumors that her glamorous lifestyle in Seoul wasn't funded by family money, but by a Korean bar owner in Gangnam, a man she was reportedly dating. He wasn't just a romantic partner, he was the financial fuel behind her fantasy. The truth was, even further from the image she had carefully crafted, Siriwipa had grown up with her single mother in Thailand, helping run a modest fruit and vegetable stall. It was a far cry from the champagne bars of Gangnam or the polished life she flaunted online. Maybe it was her upbringing that drove her hunger, a deep craving for status, security, and freedom. Or maybe she was just ambitious, ruthlessly ambitious. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: Siriwipa had figured out how to live luxuriously off the backs of others. But in 2019, the illusion began to crack. She broke up with her Korean boyfriend and returned to Bangkok. Maybe he stopped funding her lifestyle. Maybe she simply outgrew him. But back in Thailand, faced with the harsh reality of living without a bankroll, Siriwipa was at a crossroads. Most people would get a job, start a business, try something legal, but not her. Siriwipa didn't want to climb the ladder. She wanted to skip straight to the top. And so, she chose the shortcut. She chose to scam. With what was left of the money from her ex-boyfriend, she launched a small online business. It looked simple and harmless. She sold low-cost items, clothing, line character merchandise, and concert tickets. Her business model required customers to pay the full amount upfront. No exceptions. And in the beginning, she kept her word. Orders were delivered, customers were happy. Instead of expanding the right way, she started playing a much riskier game. She began encouraging customers to sell their confirmed orders to new buyers at higher prices before even receiving the product. She would tell them there were other people interested, that there was demand, that this was their chance to make quick money. And they believed her because she had delivered before. But what they didn't realize was that the setup was now complete. Siriwipa wasn't scaling a brand, she was scaling a scam. And in just a few months, she had already made $3.8 million. But for Siriwipa, that wasn't enough. She didn't just want to be rich, she wanted to be untouchable. She wanted more money, more speed, and zero hassle. And to pull that off, she knew she needed help. In late 2019, she found her answer on Tinder. That's where she met Pija Peng, a good-looking young man, just 2 years older than her. From the moment they connected, sparks flew. The chemistry was instant, the charm mutual. Conversations turned into late-night calls. Flirting turned into strategy. And it wasn't long before she realized who she was really dealing with. Pai was from Singapore, one of the wealthiest countries in Asia, a place where wealth was everywhere and luxury was normal. For Siriwipa, this wasn't just a love connection, it was an opportunity. Because in a city built on trust, systems, and status, pulling off the perfect scam wouldn't just be possible, it would be easy. And now, with Pai by her side, the operation was about to go global. But Pija Peng wasn't the wealthy Singaporean Siriwipa had imagined. In reality, he came from a very humble background. Raised by a single mother, P had dropped out of high school and spent most of his time chasing one dream, becoming a millionaire without doing any hard work. He picked up odd jobs here and there just to survive, but his real focus was gambling. Pai believed that luck, not labor, would make him rich. Unfortunately, luck never sided with him. When he met Siriwipa, he wasn't living a lavish life. He was buried in debt. But to Siriwipa, this wasn't a red flag, it was fate. She saw herself in Pai. Both were raised by single mothers. Both had limited education. Both wanted wealth without struggle. In her eyes, they weren't broken. They were perfectly aligned. Within just a week of meeting online, they arranged to see each other in person. The meeting took place in Thailand, and it only deepened their connection. Their chemistry was undeniable, but more than that, they shared the same hunger, the same fire. After that meeting, Siriwipa made up her mind. Pai wasn't just a fling, he was her partner, her ride or die. Without hesitation, she began paying off his gambling debts. She showered him with gifts, including a pair of Balenciaga shoes worth over $1,000. To anyone else, it might have looked like love. But for Siriwipa, it was more than romance. It was strategy. Together, they were about to turn their shared desperation into a criminal empire. It's no surprise that Pai was completely bamboozled. Never in his life had he imagined that a woman, let alone one as stunning and generous as Siriwipa, would be the key to living the life he had always dreamed of. But this wasn't a fantasy. This was real. Still, something gnawed at him. The cars, the shoes, the cleared debts, it didn't add up. Curious and maybe a little cautious, Pai finally asked Siriwipa the one question she had been waiting for. How was she making all this money? That's when she revealed everything. She introduced him to her business, or rather, her scam, the fake orders, the upfront payments, the reselling scheme. It was brilliant in its simplicity and dangerous in its ambition. Pai was stunned, but also impressed. He didn't hesitate. He offered to join forces, and Siriwipa agreed instantly. That was her plan all along, to find a partner who wouldn't just love her, but hustle with her. Together, they decided to take things further, much further. They got married quickly and relocated to Singapore, where they believed the potential profits would skyrocket. By the end of 2020, they were living large in a luxury condominium in Bukit Timah, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. They even brought P's mother along, completing the picture of a perfect little family. Soon after, they tied the knot in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by glamour and smiles. But behind the celebration was a plan already in motion. In May 2021, the couple officially launched their business. They called it Tradination, a company that supposedly specialized in luxury watch sales. But here's the truth. Neither of them knew the first thing about running a business. They weren't entrepreneurs, they were opportunists. All they wanted was a steady flow of money to keep their lavish lifestyle alive. A few months later, they launched Trade Luxury, this time claiming to sell luxury handbags. To the outside world, the couple seemed like rising stars in the business world. After all, starting a second company so soon after the first, that takes guts. But what no one knew was that it wasn't about growth, it was about greed. And both companies were nothing more than polished fronts for an ever-growing scam. In the early days, the business model seemed clever, almost legitimate. Siriwipa sourced genuine luxury watches and handbags directly from Thailand. She then sold them in Singapore at pre-order prices that were 10 to 20% lower than what local resellers offered. The profits weren't enormous, but they were enough to keep things running and to draw in a steady stream of eager buyers. To sweeten the deal, the couple also allowed customers to co-sign their previously purchased luxury items or sell directly through them. It gave the business the feel of a full-fledged, high-end marketplace. Everything appeared to be going smoothly. Tradination and Trade Luxury started gaining real traction, thanks in large part to heavy promotion by Instagram influencers. Positive reviews poured in. And most importantly, they opened a physical store, giving their brand the kind of legitimacy that online scams usually lack. But behind that clean storefront and glowing social media presence, trouble was already brewing. Toward the end of 2021, Siriwipa began struggling to source products from Thailand. Whether due to supply chain issues or severed vendor ties, the goods simply weren't arriving. Forced to pivot, she turned to local suppliers in Singapore, but the prices were steep, too steep. Now, the discounts she had promised clients were eating into the bottom line. Instead of making money, they were bleeding it. By February 2022, the truth was unavoidable. Both Tradination and Trade Luxury were financially drowning. Orders couldn't be fulfilled. Inventory was drying up. And worse, on paper, the companies were deep in the red, carrying net liabilities of more than 1.78 million Singapore dollars. The image of a thriving power couple was still intact. But behind the scenes, everything was falling apart. But the growing debt didn't bother Siriwipa or Pai. As I mentioned earlier, they were never in it for profit. This wasn't about building a brand or creating a sustainable business. It was about one thing: cash flow. As long as the money kept rolling in, their fantasy life could continue. So even as their companies spiraled deeper into financial ruin, Siriwipa kept taking orders. She kept accepting payments from unsuspecting customers. But instead of using that money to fulfill purchases, she funneled it into their luxurious lifestyle. She bought her mother a house in Bangkok for $2.3 million. She registered a brand new Chevrolet Corvette in Pai's name, adding to the 3 luxury cars he already owned. She poured $120,000 into renovating Tradination's retail store in Tanjong Pagar, even though it didn't need a facelift. It was more about appearances, a smokescreen. And Pai? He was getting paid like a CEO. Siriwipa arranged for him to receive $40,000 a month from Tradination and an extra $10,000 from Trade Luxury, all while the companies were bleeding money. To keep the illusion alive, Siriwipa began using new customer payments to fulfill old orders, a classic Ponzi move. She knew the math didn't add up. The goods she bought locally cost more than what she was charging. Every sale brought a loss, but she kept going anyway. By the end of March 2022, the companies were in a free fall, with nearly $9 million in deficit. And still, she kept taking orders. It wasn't until June 2022 that the illusion finally began to crack. The complaints started piling in. Orders weren't arriving. Customers wanted answers, and the storm was coming. One of the first cracks in the facade came in March 2022. A customer had consigned a Rolex to Tradination for sale, valued at $105,000. Like any consignment agreement, the deal was simple. The shop would sell the item, take a cut, and return it if no sale occurred within a set time. But this wasn't a normal transaction. Without informing the owner, Siriwipa sold the watch for just $72,000. And instead of forwarding the proceeds to the rightful owner, she funneled part of the money to Pai, who used it to pay off his credit card debt and car loans. When the customer followed up days later, Siriwipa didn't come clean. She stalled, lied, and claimed there was a buyer offering the full $105,000. It was all a bluff, a desperate attempt to buy time. The watch was never returned. The money never came. The customer, left with no choice, filed a police report against Tradination. But she was far from alone. Between May and August 2022, the dam burst. One by one, angry customers came forward. Their complaints poured in: emails, phone calls, police reports. By August, over 189 victims had stepped up, claiming losses amounting to more than $32 million. The scam had finally caught up with them. On June 27, 2022, authorities made their move. Pija Peng was arrested and released on bail shortly after. His passport was confiscated. Siriwipa was also ordered to surrender her travel documents and remain in the country pending investigation. But neither of them intended to stick around. The escape plan was already in motion. But the couple had no intention of facing justice. On July 4, 2022, just days after Pai was released on bail, Siriwipa and her husband vanished. With the help of a lorry driver, they escaped Singapore, hidden in the back of his vehicle as it crossed the border. It was a quiet, calculated move that caught authorities off guard. For nearly a month, the couple remained on the run. The Singapore police force launched a manhunt, working closely with regional partners. Every day they remained free, public outrage grew. Then, finally, a breakthrough. The fugitives were tracked to a hotel room in Johor Bahru, Malaysia. With the assistance of the Royal Malaysian Police, the Singapore authorities moved in. The arrest was swift. The couple, once living in penthouses and posing as luxury entrepreneurs, were caught in a modest hotel room, stunned and defeated. Their run was over. What followed was a long and complex legal battle that dragged on for months. In October 2024, over a year after her arrest, Pansuk Siriwipa finally pleaded guilty. 30 charges were accepted, including cheating and money laundering. But that was just the beginning. She was slapped with 166 additional cheating charges, plus 2 more for fraudulent trading. Pija Peng, meanwhile, faced 9 charges of his own. His trial is still ongoing. The courtroom proceedings may have brought a sense of justice to the hundreds of victims they defrauded, but the financial damage was done. For many, the money they lost will never be recovered. What started as a love story turned into one of Singapore's biggest fraud scandals in recent memory. A tale of greed, deception, and betrayal, all dressed in luxury.